Welcome to the After Freedom podcast, where we unpack the moves behind the movement of a generation dominated by social justice. I'm your host, Robert Mathenjwa, and of course, my co host, Nombuso, is always in the building. Now, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook at After Freedom SA, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Ring the notifications bell and give us a massive thumbs up. You can follow me at Rob Mathenjwa on Instagram, and you can follow Unam at u.nam.m. We're going to be releasing original content on each of these social media platforms, so please make sure that you don't miss out on that. Now, today is going to be an extremely special day for two reasons. Firstly, this is going to be our last episode for the year. The show is going to go on hiatus for the rest of December because Onam and I are youngins and we have to go enjoy our youth, of course, and we must go enjoy our December. But we're going to be back on the 7th of January with brand new weekly episodes, and we're going to be bigger and better than ever. I can promise you that much. But do not worry, we're going to leave you with more than enough food for thought to meditate on for the rest of December. And that brings me to the second reason as to why today is an incredibly special day. We have a two-part episode dedicated to 16 Days of Activism against gender-based violence. We're going to be speaking to two phenomenal women who have made significant strides in their fields regarding this topic. We're going to be discussing the intergenerational and psychological trauma related to violence against women. And of course, that comes with a trigger warning, so please be prepared for very, very sensitive discussion. I'm going to let Unam hold the fort for this episode, and what I'm going to be doing is sitting back and listening, much like most of you here. So please take this as an opportunity to learn, take this as an opportunity to listen to something that's brand new and informative relating to this topic. Now, our first guest is currently working as a research psychologist at TB and HIV Care. She previously worked as a research analyst at the Dubai company Pharma BP, and she interned at CAPRISA. She is one of the people who has played a massive role in the person that I've become today, and I am more than proud to call her my older sister. Our first guest is Nombuso Hloniphile Mathenjwa. So yeah, enjoy the show.
To get assistance from a police officer, a female police officer, but that police officer turned her away and told her that she should go fix her issues with her boyfriend, her partner, before coming to the police station. And I think that reflects on how in South Africa, a lot of the time, women enable gender-based violence. And that's not to say women aren't victims of gender-based violence, but sometimes we facilitate the existence of gender-based violence. So what is your take on that?
So when you say that women facilitate gender-based violence, are you talking about the police woman that Amanda DuPont went to try and report this case to, or are you saying women actually are the ones who say, "Ngizok reporter that you abused me," but and then in turn say, no, I just want to drop the case. I don't want to report him anymore. I love him. I just want to fix this and figure it out. So which type of woman are you actually indicating?
So the woman I'm dedicating to is absolutely in no way the woman who is being abused, because I think a lot of things happen when it comes to her. If she decides and then she turns back from it, sometimes she's financially dependent on her partner. So we're not talking about that woman. We're talking about women like the police officer. We're talking about mothers, for example, if a child comes to a mother and says, "Hey, I was raped or abused by this family member," and they try to sweep it under the rug. So those are the type of women we're talking about. Yeah.
So we have to look at these women, the policemen, the policewomen, not men, the policewomen who actually do these types of things or respond in that type of way. Them themselves live in a township, live in a community. They don't just come out as pure police women who are ethical, who bound to serve us as women or the country in South Africa. They come from a community where violence and GBV is perpetrated in every single way. Even their own homes, you would find that a policewoman comes from a home where umalume is an abuser, or umalume has abused me before, but I just try and say, let me just sweep it under the rug. How I gain power as a woman now is I'm a police woman and I have control, you see. So They try to the whole thing to say that now that I was abused before, but how I gain my power back as a policewoman to ensure that it never happens to me again. But we generally need to understand that, as I emphasize, police women don't come from ethical people or an ethical background. They also live in the township. They live around this type of around these types of issues, especially when South Africa it's really perpetuated at such a high rate that I don't want to say I blame them, and I also don't want to say I don't blame them as well, because we have to look at how us as children, as we are growing into adults, that we are conditioned to believe certain things. So if you live in a community where a man it's okay for a man to hit a woman, even when you become a policewoman, becoming a policewoman does not start from a young age. It literally starts at your adulthood, where you already conditioned that a woman will come to the police station, she will report gender-based violence, and then that in 2 days she'll come back and say, nah, you can drop the case, no thank you, I love my man, we'll try and figure this out. So it comes from things like that. And that's why I always wish that there are certain types of trainings that are needed within every department that we work in any occupation. You will sit even at work. Sorry, I don't want to talk out of turn, but you see it even in the workplace, how men treat women, the jokes that they have, that you can see there's a lack of training when it comes to how to interact with different genders within your own organization. So that's my take on it, basically. I don't blame them, and I feel like there's more that has to be done even within the police department in itself.
I actually think thank you so much for bringing that up. I think that's a very valid point, especially when you talk about how if you grow up in an environment that they're going to come back the next day and then they're going to drop the charges, it's harder for you as a woman and a police officer to conduct your job. And so I understand why that frustration for them would exist. So yeah, thank you so much for enlightening us on that. So I just want to ask you, how does so the question that we're going to go with here is, how does gender-based violence affect survivors as they grow?
So this really hits home, because I can't really divulge how much I work, the type of people that I work with in terms of the work that I do. Yeah. But yes, I've worked in rural areas for the past 1 year and a half, in rural areas, working with women specifically. So it's so funny. It's not even about marriaging. It's not even about marriages anymore, because the way that you put it, it's a female gets sexually assaulted, and then they marry it off to that perpetrator. But what happens now, literally, especially with the cops, because we've had a case where a cop is sitting here, the mother of the victim is sitting here, the victim is sitting here, and then the perpetrator is sitting right across the table. So I was shocked to find that the police man, in fact, the policeman, not woman, the policeman would say that no, now that we are here, the victim is apologizing, and we can see that he wants to compensate in a certain way. So the policeman would encourage that the victim's mother take the money as a way of compensation, and as an apology. For them, it seemed like it's some sort of punishment. But we know that most perpetrators don't look at that as punishment. They see it as an easy way out. An easy way out to say that, oh, okay, to say that they've paid for their crimes is to mean that they've admitted that what they did was a crime, but they don't see it as a crime. They see it as, I took something, and so in return you get this, and it won't hurt their pockets in any way, right? What you said regarding the fact that gender-based violence awarenesses, those campaigns, even social media, and I know that I'm speaking to you guys, you're like a social media platform as well, right? But that's why I don't want to give you like a puff piece answer to it. I want to be realistic.
Yeah.
The media does not cater for rural area people. It does not. I can tell you right now, I spent 3 months in Eastern Cape, the very rural area of Eastern Cape. DSTV multi-choice, you would not find a house or a community where they have DSTV, which For example, if there's a campaign in Mzansi Magic, you won't get a house that has DSTV or multi-choice playing those types of campaigns. Even the men who are perpetrators, they don't have time to sit down and watch Mzansi Magic or TV, or even if it's just playing at SABC One. Where's the electricity for me to see all of these awarenesses? Data in these areas is such a privilege. It's such a privilege. What I'm saying is, where will these men even view such views from women or the rest of the country? They're secluded. They're not there. They don't have access to that. Even smartphones, they don't matter. Because I'm really being realistic. You would think that there's an idea when certain people who come to such shows, they speak and they say rural areas don't have access to this, but I'm telling you from a point where I could see every day. I worked there for 3 months and I could see now some of these men don't even have smartphones. So how will they know that you are posting on WhatsApp, stop gender-based violence, stop GBV, stop violence against women? How will they even know that? Who's there in the ground actually talking to these men? You'll be shocked at the amount of abuse that women go through in rural areas. But I'm not just talking about women, even men themselves. Psychologically, no one gives birth to a rapist and then the baby just grows up and says, hey, I want to be a rapist, I want to be an abuser. That male, that person had to have gone through some sort of abuse themselves to be to perpetrate and continue the cycle of abuse. It starts somewhere, and when you don't heal at some point, you keep doing it, and it becomes a generational curse. And you're not just doing it to your own generation, you're doing it to a lot of people, because a 40-year-old man can rape a 5-year-old. Already you are influencing the next generation. Already you are, I don't want to say you're killing the next generation, but you are traumatizing the next generation. Yeah. So yeah, that's my take on it. Media does not realistically reach those people. My question would be, how do we reach rural areas? How are we supposed to champion gender-based violence when even us as professional women, we dress up nicely, we dress up professionally, and we say we want to cover up everything. But as soon as we go to or we stand next to an older man in a rural area, the advances, the things that they say, you would definitely see that they are not aware that what you're doing is actually wrong. Just like in the workplace, you get there and men have certain jokes. They don't understand that's actually very offensive towards me. Like, I don't like it, and you don't know how to say it without feeling like you're being disrespectful or overzealous, if that's how I like to label you. So yeah, media needs to reach rural areas, because most of the people when you count, you say people in the city, or this amount of girls have fallen pregnant. But these girls, when they go to university, they come from rural areas, go to university, you then count them as part of the suburban people or the suburban civilians. You don't realize that they need to go back to those rural areas, and they're also part of that number, So it's just like when you go to Gauteng, you find that majority of the people were not born there. They were born in KZN, in rural areas, in Eastern Cape, in Mpumalanga.
Yeah, I think, Sis Nombuso, honestly, you're hitting the mark here, hey? Because I think a lot of the time we forget about things such as access. Obviously, when you post a campaign, even for us with this podcast, even though I think we are trying to get more information out there, the question is always, how do we get information to the right people? Because if you keep recycling information to people who already understand what's going on in the world, it's not really going to make much of a difference. So the other thing that I just want us to look at here is, let's place a scenario where we have a victim of sexual violence and they are now growing into an adult. So what are some of the behaviors that we can expect from someone who has experienced sexual violence at a young age and they're now growing into an adult? Because I know that with other people, from my personal experience with like people that I know, some people become hypersexual. They just want to engage in sex a lot because they want to gain back their power. Some people don't want to do it at all because, you know, there's a trauma attached to that. So what are some of the behaviors that we can expect from people in such manners?
Yeah, I'm gonna start off with a very cliche line, which is it's different for everyone,
Yeah.
right? But what you can definitely count on is the sadness, the feeling of being broke, the feeling of being helpless. And I always say, with trauma, just like you said, with trauma, it's either you are your trauma or you're the opposite of your trauma. Just like you said, that you become hypersexual or you don't like sex at all. You don't want you. Most men will label you as a feminist because they lack the understanding of what a feminist is specifically. Yeah. So a person who's pro woman, who doesn't like sex, doesn't want to be objectified, who sees sex as like an objectifying practice, you know. So, like I said, it's different for everyone, but you would find that there's sadness, there's people falling into deep depression, and depression is like the hierarchy, right? So there's so much under that depression that you are suicidal, you know, you are antisocial, you don't want to talk to people, you don't want to interact with people, you even become a perpetrator yourself. So we can sit here and say men become perpetrators. No, women. Yes. If your aunt was raped and molested at a young age, me personally, with the knowledge that I have, there'll be less chances if I had a child, I would let that person sleep with my kid in the same bed. Because it happens that, especially in rural areas, they don't understand what has happened to them. They don't like it. They know that they don't like it. They can feel that wrong. But they specifically don't understand what happened. They're thinking that, oh, this behavior, since I was molested and raped for like 2 years in a row or 3 years in a row, this is normal. So when I see a small child who's 6 years old and they're sleeping with me, maybe I can touch them. Okay, it's okay. This is okay. This happened to me. Why are you fighting it? Why are you not making it a big deal? They don't understand what has happened is that it's wrong. It's not okay. It's trauma that needs to be healed so that it stops with them. They don't make it generational, you see. So that's the one thing that I really fear with victims, is that themselves become perpetrators in the future. And so those are just some of the symptoms that you would see, or some of the behaviors that most people or most victims will exhibit.
And I think you have mentioned, Uti, you have been working in Eastern Cape for the past 3 months. Not a few months. I think 2 weeks ago, a girl from Eastern Cape actually a 16-year-old girl from Eastern Cape committed suicide after being, abused verbally, as in she was teased and belittled in school because she was spiritually gifted. So she was bullied by teachers, she was bullied by her peers, and just everyone. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we're recording this currently in the 16 Days of Activism against genderbased, women and child abuse. So I just want us to look at that. Most of the time, when we talk about gender-based violence or, activism against child abuse and abuse in general, we talk about things such as physical abuse. But she endured emotional abuse, and the consequences of that emotional abuse were so severe that she felt like she had to take her life. And that was the best way to deal with the emotional abuse that she was facing. So what can we learn from that experience? What can we learn from that?
That we need to teach our kids to be kinder.
Yeah.
We really need to teach our kids to be kinder. It just goes back to this thing of no child again is born a racist. Whether you're white, black, Indian, colored, you are not born a racist. You are born and then you are taught through society that there's a difference in people in terms of color, skin, and how they behave and how they should be treated, So this bullying thing, because your child is a person who actually bullies other kids, you see them as strong. They are taught at home that you are strong, you have a strong persona. So take what's yours in the world and run with it. Instead of teaching them how to be kinder. They always say, psychologists, why do they ask about my family? Why do they ask about my parents? Why do they go back there? Why go back to the past when my problem is now? Because your problem didn't start now. Your problem was inherited through the learned behaviors within your structure, and your most immediate structure is your family. It's your parents. If you don't have parents, it's your family, your surroundings, and then society comes in and then tries to shape what you've learned at home in whatever way they might deem it to be. But then it's also your family's responsibility to try and shape back what they've taught you. So I don't know what we could learn from this specifically. What I could say to children, besides, children don't have much control in the world. They don't have much control in what's happening in the world. It's our responsibility as parents, as sisters, as older brothers. We've seen what the world looks like. We've seen, and we need to really do better in terms of what we teach them at home. When you teach your child to swear at home, what do you think they're going to go into the world saying? How does that look? Because, when I see a child who's a bully, I don't see the child as a bully specifically. I see the family structure. I see that, okay, this is what home looks like. Home lacks supervision. Home lacks attentiveness to the child's behavior. Home lacks some sort of comfortability, some sort of comfort where your child says, Mom, there's something wrong with me, or Dad, there's something wrong with me, and I have this type of anger because this and this happened. How can I deal with it? If you're just going to brush it away, where would all of that anger go to? It'll go towards other children. And when you see a humble child, and you see a child who's not as aggressive, that child will wonder why. What's wrong with you? How can I turn you to me? You see that whole squad of bullies. Yeah. How can I turn you to me? And if you're very resistant. Yes, high school cliques. And if you're very resistant, they're gonna bully you to try and diminish whatever you have. Because honestly, deep down, they want to be nice. They want to be caring. They want to be soft. But they also understand that caring, that softness comes from their own parents, and they don't have it themselves. They don't
receive it. So it's hard for them to understand.
So they just give up what. Yes. So I always say that it's kids give off what they receive. If you're negative all the time as a parent and you're just not attentive, you don't care, trust and believe that most of the time that's what your child will turn out to be.
So now that we're already talking about parents and the role that they play when it comes to the development stages of their kids, what about the parents I want us to look at parents with unaddressed traumas, right? Because most of the time, if you're going to be a parent that is unattentive to your child, there's a problem, right? If you're going to be a parent who's very aggressive, there's a problem there as well. So so I think even with this example actually that I've given, that's an example of how most parents actually have unaddressed traumas. It may be sexual, it may be just them, maybe they were bullied once and all of those things. But I think specifically when it comes to gender-based violence, and if you are a scenario, again, a woman who is now a mother and you've experienced gender-based violence and you become a parent to a boy, and you've experienced gender-based violence from a man, then I feel like you may be more aggressive when you are raising that child because you are reflecting your trauma on that child. So how does that reflect with parents and children?
There are not much cases where a mother gives birth willingly. When I say willingly, a mother that has not been raped, a child that's not a product of rape. If you give birth to a child from a man that you love, your husband, and you really love each other and you care for each other, and you give birth to a son, it won't. There are less cases where it happens that you're aggressive towards the boy. But that can happen if the child is a product of rape. they've been violated, you've been violated, and this child was born, then definitely there are a lot of articles, there's a lot of cases where women now, even with it doesn't even have to be a boy child, even girl children, they are very aggressive towards, I don't want you here, you remind me of the perpetrator that actually hurt me deeply, left a scar, and you're like a prison scar, you're like there every day, and I had to carry you, you know. And it even goes back to the rural areas, because I always say I'm pro-choice, you know. So if you want to have a child, have a child. If you don't want to have a child, it's completely your right to terminate, you know. But it goes back to rural areas where they don't have that information. They don't know that at 2 months you can also terminate a pregnancy if you feel like you've been violated. Even these types of services, they're supposed to be provided in clinics. But again, it goes back to the police story, that even the nurses themselves come from certain homes where it's religious. They don't want to advertise termination of pregnancies. So they don't give children that type of information, or they don't give victims that type of information based on being biased through their religious beliefs, right? So now you've given birth, you've carried this child as a product of rape for 9 months, and you give birth to them. And obviously you're going to be very aggressive towards them. You are not going to want anything to really do with them, but you take care of them because that's what society expects from you. That's what your family expects for you. Yes. But when you look at your child, all you feel is depression, and you'll abuse them, meaning what happens then? You're perpetuating the same cycle of violence. Even if as a mother you give birth to a boy child who's a product of rape, what happens then is you treat the child very badly, you abuse them, you beat them, you do whatever. The child feels, as my mother does not love me, so every other woman in the world, I'm going to try to make them love me by force. I would try to make them love me. I would try for them to be beside me all the time. Or because my mother beat me up so bad at some point at my childhood, or every day of my childhood, what I would do is, how I take that power as a grown man now is I beat women. I hit women, because I remember exactly how it felt like when a woman hit me. She took that power away from me. So now I'm taking power away from these women that I meet every day, or fall in love with, or profess that you love them. So I take that power from them by beating them as well, you see. So what you've done there, the mother has taken her trauma, transferred it to the child. That child has now transferred it to another woman. Same woman that's been beaten up, abused, or raped will now continuously do the same thing, you know. So that's what happens. It's a cycle. It really starts at home.
And I think most of the time, whenever women, or anyone actually, because we understand that both men, women, and everybody else, they can experience some sort of trauma, right? I think, for example, even with Amanda DuPont, she was able to move out of that situation, break out from that trauma, and in fact, she was minding her own business. And then Jube came about and was talking about her on the podcast, and she felt it necessary to take back her power by responding to that. But we still find people saying things like, oh, why didn't she just leave the first time Mshaya? Why didn't she just leave the first time she was being abused, the first time he raped her, and stuff like that? And I think, you know, there are a lot of things that we can talk about there. Oh, maybe she didn't understand. But most of the time, it's financial dependency. You need money to live, and especially in areas that are very remote, even in CBDs actually, a man is still very traditionally the one who provides most of the time. Even though we've moved from that, he still provides, he has the money, and he's financing your existence. So Manje, when you leave that situation, you don't have anyone else who you can depend on financially. So that's, I'm not saying for Amanda DuPont, right? But I'm just saying for other women, this is the reality that they are faced with. So how can we just like be more sensitive to situations like that, and be more realistic about situations like that?
How can you be more sensitive? Hey, that's a relative or subjective. It would be a relative or subjective response, because, like I said, it will really cater for us modern people who have social media to actually be aware of such things. But in the rural area, Amanda DuPont was abused. But you would find that and there are also, as much as there are cases where a person has been abused and then they perpetuate the same behavior to the kids and it becomes a generational thing. But there are also people like us in the modern world where we say, because we have access to media, because we've seen how GBV is such a huge movement. It's a whole pandemic in itself, women abuse, we would want to become better mothers. We know that we want to become better mothers. But what about the women in rural areas? What do they know as a better mother? What's an example of a better mother when they come from a home where literally everyone hides abuse, where it's okay to hide abuse? And then you find that same woman going into in suburb areas where now they're like, but this is foreign. I know that you just hide such issues. You don't talk about it, you see. So they wouldn't know. They wouldn't know how to deal with such things. But we have it. And because we have so much awareness around this topic, we will become better mothers. We know what's right and wrong. Right. So how to become sensitive towards this issue? I would say, if it was your sister, what would you do? People should just think of that. If it was your sister, if it was your mother, what would you say? Because if your sister was the one being chopped into pieces and killed and abused, and you found them in a suitcase in the street, the disrespect, the indignity of finding a family member just cut up in pieces and placed in the street in the corner in a suitcase, what would you say? That's why people just jump to say things. They jump to talk. They jump to have opinions. But you really need to think, I also have a sister myself. I'm talking about me, Nombuso. I also have a baby sister. So if the same thing happened to her, what would I say? Would I stand with Jup again, or would I stand with my sister? So we need to internalize things in that way and not just speak because it's more relevant to oppose Amanda DuPont's experiences. Because a lot of these media platforms like Twitter, they'll go against Amanda DuPont because it's refreshing, right? It's refreshing. Everyone is talking about supporting Amanda DuPont. So now if you go this view where you look at Jup's, when you're in Jup's side or you're trying to discredit what Amanda's saying, you are fresh, you are new, you are interesting, because you've heard so much about GBV. As people who have access to the media, we know so much about GBV. We could tell you what GBV stands for. You can even place it in different orders of the letters. We'll still know what it means, right? So to stand with Jup is more fashionable, I guess, or more relevant. Makes you more relevant, makes you more woke, right? So, but you don't internalize. If it happened at your own home, how would you feel? And for those people who would say, I would still stand with Jup, I still feel like Amanda DuPont is faking it, or she like they just trying to discredit her. I would like for those two people to actually look at their own households. Is that what your family taught you? Is that what you grew up knowing? Is that what your community teaches you? Is that what society teaches you, that women are meant to be objectified? It's okay to say a woman is like, yes, of course, there are women who actually lie about such cases. But if we don't try at least to believe them, for those who want to come out and speak, where would they go? Because every time I try to speak my case or I try to report a case, you're trying to find ways to discredit me. How will all the other women who are silent come out and say that I was abused?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons she said that she spoke out, was because she wanted other women to feel confident enough to come out and speak about these issues. But one of the things that is very prevalent in South Africa with gender-based violence is that most cases aren't even reported, right? Because we've already established, we would see the closest people to you are your family members, right? And your family members have cultures that they practice, they have traditions that they practice. And I think as a Zulu child, as a Zulu girl, right, I haven't experienced this personally, but I know that in some areas, culturally, it is seen as disrespectful or if you come out and you say you want to speak out about such issues. When you say, Wuti, I was actually abused by this person, this person, this person, you are discredited in all of those ways. So how do we maintain culture? Because culture is valuable. We all, culture is valuable and we shouldn't let it die off. So how do we maintain our culture but single out all of those things that are just bad? Like, how do we maintain culture and deal with gender-based violence?
We need to teach our parents as well.
Yeah.
You really need to teach first of all, you need to teach our parents how to apologize for everything that they've allowed to happen. You know, because it's not that you can't talk to parents. You actually can talk to parents if you really, because it's something that you have to take slowly. You have to take it step by step, because trying to change a 40-year-old something's mindset, that culture is supposed to be this and that, and certain things mustn't be spoken about. It will take time. It's a whole process. It's an everyday process. But we need to teach our parents that this is not okay. This is definitely not okay. And how important it is to put your child first. The one thing that your parents, and let me not group all parents. The one thing about a loving parent is that they will love their children. They will protect their child. So the one thing, use that, and I'm not saying use as in a negative way, but make them see or help them navigate through the love that they have for you, that what has happened to me or what has been done in this family is not okay. It's not right. This person needs help. If you're not going to send this person to prison, and I don't want to give this alternative because really, but I'm being realistic to a point where most families will not send that person to jail. They won't send the person to prison. But how can we help this person heal? How can this person heal? Even as a perpetrator, how can we deal with this person? Because taking money is intlawulo, as compensation, meaning that you've sold my virginity or you've sold my body to a family member and you are okay with that. And that child will grow up with so much hatred for their for their parents. So it's educate our parents. Sit down with your parents and say, and it's not something that it doesn't have to be something that happens to you personally, but it has to be something, if you've seen it around the family, you've seen it within your family, and you say, I'm not okay with what happened. You guys did not deal with this issue in the right way. You guys need to first apologize. And you guys now need to come as a family, just like you were able to come as a family and hide such things. You need to come as a family and see how you're going to reveal this, or how you're going to solve this type of problem. Because it can't be that you're hiding this person, you're hiding this uncle or aunt or auntie, and they'll continue hurting other people. So they'll not just stop with this person with this one victim within the family, but they'll hurt other people. So honestly, we need to talk to our parents. It's not okay. They need to understand what abuse is.
Right, powerful statements. And I think the last question that I want us to end off with is, let me again paraphrase this. So the gender-based violence that exists in South Africa is not like similar to the gender-based violence that exists everywhere else. It's a very severe gender-based violence that exists in South Africa. It's not just, I'm going to slap you, I'm going to, punch you around, and then that's it. It's a gender-based violence where I'm going to slap you, I'm going to rape you, and then once I'm done with you, I'm going to kill you. And then after that, I'm going to chop your body up, put it in a suitcase, and scatter you wherever I want. That's the reality of South Africa. I think in 1 week, I heard of 3 different stories where this has happened. The first one, the girlfriend of the boyfriend found a woman's body parts in the boyfriend's fridge, right? The second one that I heard of, it was a case in Eastern Cape where this 21-year-old boy was living with his 17-year-old girlfriend, and he also killed her and mutilated her body, and that the body was found. And there was another case that I heard of. So it's very shocking that in 1 week, I can hear 3 different stories of how women have been abused, killed, and chopped up and thrown wherever in South Africa. So a lot of people are now saying that we need to bring back the death penalty because of how severe gender-based violence is in South Africa. And I think most of the time, if the death penalty comes into play, it becomes harder for victims to even report their cases because oh, you want this person to die, we're not going to take you seriously anymore. So we don't have to have an answer to this right now, but would you support the death penalty coming back for people who have, for perpetrators of extreme gender-based violence?
Yes, it definitely, I would say yes, and it has to be implemented to a certain degree of that type of crime, right?
Okay.
Because you can't chop somebody up and say, like, for example, you can't have a death penalty for someone who stole chocolates at a tuck shop, right? So you have the death penalty for someone who's been proven without a shadow of a doubt that they've actually, and they've confessed and they've said that, yes, I'm guilty, I've killed this person, I did chop up their body, and that also I have accomplices who also helped me with that. Yes, definitely, I would say yes, because what happens is that they go into jail, they write letters of apologies to the family's victims, but it doesn't take away the pain. It doesn't take away what has happened to the family. It doesn't take away the trauma within the family, because now, again, what if that mother or that woman left a child? They're going to one day grow up, read in the article, oh, my mother was chopped up, my mother was killed or murdered in this way through gender-based violence, right? So I would definitely say I support it. I support it for real, because people can't go unpunished. And you would find that this level of murdering style, where I hit you, I rape you, and then I chop you up, or I kill you and chop you up, has heightened, because the level of punishment has also heightened, right? And so if men know that hitting a woman, raping a woman is wrong, they know that they'll go to jail. Even in rural areas, they know it's wrong and they know that they'll go to jail. So what do they do if they know that they're going to go to jail for even 1 or 2 days? They ensure that, I need to kill you, just like with hijackings, because hijackings have now become harder to do. There are trackers, there are even secret trackers within cars. And if you do get caught, the victim will identify you and say, yes, he was there, definitely going to jail, right?
Yeah.
So same thing with abuse is that if she lives to point me out as a perpetrator, I'm definitely going to jail. And for most perpetrators, they're not trying to go to jail. They are trying to just continue the cycle of viciousness, right? So, like I said, the higher the punishment is, the higher the level of killing, or the type of killing that goes on, or the type of abuse that goes on, right? So they cut these women in pieces because they're trying to hide. They're trying to hide the evidence. They don't want to go to jail. So I'm also worried with saying that, yes, I do support the death penalty, but would we ever get people who say that, who confess and say, yes, I did kill that woman, I did chop her up, who would say yes deliberately just so that they could die?
Yeah.
So there'll be less chances that they would confess, and it'll be like a whole cycle of trying to get that person, try to convict that person, and it'll take such a long time. And what happens to the family of the victim? They have to endure weeks, days, even going to the court, trying to follow up with the case. It'll definitely take so much time. But yeah, I guess lawyers would have to discuss this further, but that's just my opinion in it, because we won't find these bodies. If there is a death penalty, we won't find these bodies as easy as we are now, because even jail has become a place. You can come out of jail. Just this case where this man chopped his girlfriend up and then put her in a suitcase and then left her in the street. He got 25 years in jail. So he's a young man. So can you imagine, after 25 years, he'll come out with a PhD degree, he gets meals every day. first of all, he comes from a very impoverished place, right? He was living in one room, hardly food there, fridge stuffed with some of the woman's body parts. You can tell this person is very poor. So when they go to jail, come on a PhD, they'll get entertainment, they'll have people around them. Jail for me is not even that dangerous anymore. It really isn't. So it's more, I will confess and say yes, because where I'm going is not that harsh anyways. I'll be out in 25 years and then I'll come out with a certain qualification. I'll go work as like in logistics, drive trucks, your life goes on. So that's why it's easier for some of these perpetrators to say, yes, I confess I did it, because the system is making it even more comfortable for them.
Yeah. I think, Nombuso, honestly, we could go on for days talking about this, but so far, I think this has been very powerful and very impactful. And thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the After Freedom podcast. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to unpack, and I'm so glad that we had you for this episode. So just before we end it, is there anything else you would just like to add as like final words for this episode?
I could give so much, advice to women and around this whole issue, but I really want to talk to the parents specifically. I really want to talk to the family members who are grooming our children, who are grooming the next generation. We in the modern space are going to do a bit better than our last generation, but we really need a violence-free generation, especially when it comes to gender-based violence. We need a violence-free generation. So I'm talking to the parents to say, really look at just stand in your household, really look at your children, really look at them, look at their personalities. And if you see that there's something wrong, ignoring it and saying that your child will grow out of a certain behavior is being ignorant to the fact that there is a problem. Talk to your child, find out what's wrong. Let them not be afraid to come to you to confess something that they've done wrong, or to confess that something has happened to them in this manner. Even when you sit around your friends, your family members, your kids, try not to shame certain things. Like, for example, shaming HIV infection. It makes it harder for the person sitting next to you to talk about it if they're suffering the same thing. To sit around a group of friends and say, my man doesn't hit me, my man cares about me, he loves me, I could never go through that. He loves me so much that he would never lay a hand on me. What do you think this woman sitting next to you, or your friend, or your sister, what do you think they're going to think? Do you think they're going to be able to talk to you?
Yeah, no.
Saying, even with our parents, saying that our parents who try to tell us or try to shame dating in our ages, from the ages of 13, to say that you're not supposed to date, you're not supposed to do that. We now do things in secret, to a point where when something happens, when something happens to us, when we're abused or raped, we can't tell our parents, because the first thing that they're going to say is, I told you not to do that. I told you to not go there, but you went. So you were asking for it. That's not how you should respond to a child. That's definitely not how you respond to a child. You don't say to them, you deserve you're basically saying that you deserve what happened to you, because I told you not to go there, because I know what's good for you. You knowing what's good for me also means that whatever negative things that happen to me, you need to also teach me how to heal from those things, how to talk to you about such things, So I really want to send a message to the family members, to the friends. Let's do better by our children. Us doing better by our children is us doing better by the next generation.
Thank you so much, Nombuso. Thank you so much for coming out for this episode. Do enjoy the rest of your evening. Yeah, goodbye.